developers are lazy. They're lazy from a work standpoint, not necessarily from a mental standpoint. So how can we do, normally, in most endeavors, if you do 20% of the work, you get 20% of the results. How do we get the 80% of the results? Prototyping and elaborating, iterating over things. So what happens in a typical software project? In a big design up front, you go and you build all these specs. And at the end, most of it doesn't matter. The web changes so fast that a lot of these things become irrelevant 6 months later. Also, most of the time, we don't work for IT managers that often anymore. We're working for marketing managers. We're working for people who don't know how to read technical specs anyway. I'd pull out some UML diagrams and be like, what's this? So if we can give them working software to look at, even if it's really rough, and Drupal excels at this, we can very quickly build working software that's very rough, show it to a client, and they can say, yeah, I like that, I don't, and they can make decisions, they can make well-informed closed-loop decisions about the most efficient way to build their software. And this is kind of my last slide, but the 5 disciplines of web leaders. Anyone ever read the book, The Fifth Discipline? Awesome. Very, very cool book. Basically, it's about how to create learning organizations. And what's interesting is that the 5 disciplines, I think, of web leaders are very similar. Something that's kind of interesting is that in the 90s, there's a bunch of books that came out, like Built to Last, Tom Peters' book about management. Wow, the name slips me at the moment. Pardon? In Search of Excellence, thank you. Thank you very much. And it talked about culture, and it talked about all the idea of sort of the mission statement of companies. Well, really, Tom Peters came out with a great book called Reimagined about 2004 that actually said, you know what, I don't know how much of that was really right. Really, great companies are great at innovating. And that's why I think actually what's interesting is that the 5 disciplines, in fact, actually if you ever read, it's a great book, Built to Last, out of the companies, they basically said there's this set of companies that these companies for 50 years have been better than all the rest. Well, since that book has been written, or at least the last time I checked, the only company that's actually continued to beat the S&P 500 is GE, because GE breaks themselves down and reinvents their departments. They are excellent at innovation. The other, I believe there's 16, the other 15 have fallen off. So what are the disciplines? A, user-focused. If you're using Agile, most people are going to use user stories. Keep focused on what the user. One of my favorite sayings in software is the software is not done until the last user is dead. Make everything about your user. Best practices driven. So these are sort of mental models, if you will. What are the best ways of doing things? You can test for them. The great thing is nowadays a lot of these are fairly well understood. This will help you greatly accelerate and not make mistakes. A learning organization. And Peter Senge's book is probably a great place. He actually is the director of MIT's School for Memory and Learning. And I might have that backwards on the School Institute for Learning and Memory. But a learning organization. How do we, it's not just about an individual that learns things, it's how as we as a group set goals and learn as a group. Out of a learning organization will come 2 things. One will be better best practices. The other will be experimentation. So best practices are about how to do things more efficiently based on accepted models, but truly great organizations are always innovating and they're doing it through experimentation. The last step you need, and actually I am borrowing this from Peter's book, The Fifth Discipline. His 5th discipline is systems thinking. Basically what this means is we need short feedback loops. The world has gotten very complex, and one of the things that messes us up as humans is when we do something and we don't know the ramifications in the near term of what we just did. In fact, actually, I think it's quite apropos if you look at the banking crisis, you look at a lot of different things. When you're not understanding the full system, and the full system, dangerous things can happen. One of the best ways to understand the full system is through the empirical process of inspecting and adapting. And that's what you're doing in Agile. You run in sprints. and say every 2 weeks, normally it's 1 to 4 weeks, most companies are running around 2-week sprints. At the end of that time, you say, what went well during this 2-week sprint, what did not? So and then you're getting back with the product owner, so it's not the old days where you spent months building specs and you went away for 6 months to a year and built a site. You're always getting feedback. And so Agile is a great way to do systems thinking, which, and I realize a lot of this is not necessarily Drupal, but Drupal's ability to quickly prototype and elaborate is phenomenal for enabling Agile and for enabling a lot of these disciplines. And so the ultimate process goal, sustainable continuous innovation. One thing I would recommend for any of you who are web developers out there, anyone who comes to you and says, I want to be great online, do not let them talk you into giving them a single project. Have them do continual improvement. They need to be continually building their web presence. You, of course, want to do it in a sustainable way. It needs to be profitable. Don't go out and just spend millions of dollars and have really no return for that. Make it sustainable, make it continuous. But one of the best things that you can do, one of the big mistakes that we make, and I made in my younger years, was go out and building a single project for people who wanted to be great. Rome wasn't built in a day. It takes quite a while. That's the presentation. Questions? I guess I can mic. Yes?
All right, are you going to post these slides anywhere?
Sure. I'm assuming the camp is. If not, I'll put them up on SlideShare. Anybody else? Yes?
So, talk to some of your folks and talk to you before about this, but you have an interesting practice in that you do an entire company agile cycle, right?
Yes.
How do you manage to run different projects in the same agile cycle? It's not really a trivial question.
Right. Practice. You know, a lot of it is, so the ducks, the feet are churning, but it looks smooth on the top. You know, a lot of it is, first of all, it's not a lot of small projects. Most of our clients that we are selling you X number of hours per month, and we've got some flexibility of where we can move it around. So certain clients have certain emergencies. It is tricky, and although in general it's worked fairly well. But you know, a lot of, I mean, you guys are agile. You know, a lot of it is you start out and you read the books and you do it the evangelical way, and then you just keep iterating over the process. And so it's just a whole bunch of red cards that have come up over many sprint retros on how we can get better. And then a lot of it is, you know, the other big thing is if you're going to run agile, it helps tremendously to know your clients. Every client is different. Some we even break out the wireframes and we start wireframing for them because they do need to see that paper. Other ones we start building software. So those are some of the keys. But let's, you know, actually, I think we're going to try to do a BOF on Agile. I'd love to talk more about it. Yes?
How much does the product lifecycle model play into how you operate internally in terms of, like, when you go to a client and you communicate to them, you know, okay, this is going to be 3,000 hours, it's going to take us 6 months. Do you try to build in the product life cycle of, you know, prototyping and testing, and then the kind of the maturity phase where the project levels off for a period of time? I mean, obviously you've got continual updates and stuff, but
sort of. It happens in a little bit of a different way in Agile. So we will go in and do a sprint zero, and mainly you try to stick with. So one of my favorite phrases in Agile is adequate planning and frequent conversations. And so we'll go in and we'll plan things